at 3:06 a.m. My phone lit the ceiling above our bed with a confetti animation I had never seen before and a government logo I knew too well. ServiceOntario congratulated me on a successful newborn registration. The message named a baby I had never heard of, listed my surname as the child's, and showed my SIN partially masked, as if this surreal moment required a flourish of privacy. I lay there with my heart hitting an extra beat, the benign kind my GP in the junction had shrugged at in January when I complained about stress and skipped lunches, now thudding like a coin dropped into a fountain. The app showed that the registration had been submitted at 1:42 a.m., accepted at 2:54 a.m., and linked to an OHIP card request marked Rush. A button offered to let me view and print a temporary confirmation. Another offered to add the child to my CRA account for the Canada Child Benefit. It might as well have offered me a trapdoor out of my own life. I semi-detached on Fern Avenue, 2 blocks north of Queenie's, sits in its row like a book with a torn dust jacket. The front hall has a runner I pulled from a salvage shop on Dundas. The living room leans a little because no one in 1913 thought sofas would weigh this much. The back room is my office and shipping area, shelves of bubble wrap and poly mailers, stacks of vintage receivers labelled with painter's tape, a small bench where I weed out crackling pots and bad capacitors. I sell refurbished audio gear on Etsy and do build and shelving for condos in Lesserville when the order is slow. On good weeks, I feel like a minor miracle, a man making a living by making old things behave. On bad weeks, I perform electrical triage and price jobs like I'm negotiating with hunger. My wife, Naomi, is a senior auditor to a mid-market firm on King Street called Mandel and Reeve. She lives on Teams calls and in spreadsheets that are half numbers and half crisis management. Busy season turns her into a ghost with a laptop, a woman who eats salads at 10 p.m. and comes home with the smell of downtown trapped in her coat. Her hours ebb and flood. Sometimes she crashes on a co-worker's extra bed in a Liberty Village condo rather than drive or Uber home at 3 a.m. She says the city looks cleaner at that hour, like the day hasn't had a chance to mess it up yet. Money floats like a draft under our door. I tore my left shoulder last fall manhandling a credenza and spent 12 weeks coaxing it back to usefulness with exercises printed on flimsy paper. 2 months ago, our Transit Connect needed a new catalytic converter thanks to the exact thief everyone warns you about. Insurance covered some. Not all. The property tax reassessment arrived like a brick. Naomi's firm did a headcount realignment in December that spared her but left stress standing in our kitchen like a third person. We have a line of credit at TD that we opened with the best intentions and a rusty lock. The ServiceOntario email had 2 attachments. The first was a PDF with my name and the child's, a timestamp, the Registrar General's mark in crisp black that felt like a press of authority on my sternum. The second showed an OHIP eligibility verification request with my plan listed under family coverage, a policy I had never paid for because my coverage is a clumsy hybrid, an individual plan high on premiums and low on mercy. Both documents show traces of Naomi's hand, our mailing address correct down to the unit's phantom a previous owners jerked around with, our family doctor's clinic, my phone number. The mother's name in the field showed Naomi's last name and a middle initial she only uses for passports. The father section was me. There is no elegant way to describe how a screen can make your chest feel like a dropped cupboard. I opened our Nest app. The doorbell camera sees moss-like burglars and once missed a courier carrying a set of Bowers and Wilkins towels because he moved kindly. At 12:57 a.m., Naomi appeared with a white flat envelope tucked under her elbow, the kind notaries live in. She wore her black watch and the tired set of a person who has fallen asleep on a desk for 20 minutes and been startled by her own breathing. At 1:11, she left with the same envelope and a tote bag from UG that we use for groceries and for moving legal-looking things. At 2:34, she returned with the tote, now heavier, and a small shopping bag with a pale blue stripe. She paused on our porch with her forehead pressed to the door as if asking a question quietly. I did what men like me do when the floor shifts. I made lists. I moved $7,500 from our joint checking into the business account I only use for client deposits. I froze my credit file with Equifax and TransUnion, wrote the PINs on a strip of green painter's tape, and stuck it inside the cover of my notebook. I set travel notices on our visa because fraud and travel are cousins. I put a hold on the TD line of credit and required in branch, both signatures. Manager's name and badge, no exceptions, case RBL OCF-28731. I logged into CRA and toggled the benefits section off wherever a cursor would allow it. I called ServiceOntario's helpline at 718 and filed a fraud report with a reference number that sounded like something dropped in a parking lot for GO-442,711. I wanted to believe in a benevolent explanation. Naomi has a cousin in Mississauga who has been in a mess with an ex for a year, the kind that spills into every inbox and makes holidays into planning meetings. It would make sense for Naomi to try to bend the system to protect someone who did not deserve another bruise. It would make sense for Naomi to use my name in a hurry because she trusts me to forgive her when the emergency is past. It would not make sense legally. My body weighed the ethics. My hands kept printing PDFs. The first independent witness arrived before I asked. Our postal carrier, Lou, the type who knows which front steps tilt and which dogs gossip, slid a handful of misdirected mail under our door with a note on a sticky, "Thought you'd want these." One envelope from Sun Life addressed to Naomi included a dependent add-on confirmation for newborn under our policy that does not exist. An internal print code in the footer told me someone had used an employer plan. Another envelope from a condo management company in Liberty Village named Atlantic Residences contained a fob welcome kit for Unit 702 addressed to MS N. Cohen and Ms. L. Cohen, with instructions for Luxor 1 parcel pickups and underground parking details for Peterborough. The mailing address used our house. The phone number on the form was my cell, off by 1 digit. I called the building manager and introduced myself as the guy with misdirected mail. She apologized, said there had been a flurry of move-ins the week prior, and confirmed that Unit 702's lease listed to Cohen's. Move-in was logged as last Thursday at 5:30 p.m. Fob numbers assigned. Deposits posted via e-transfer from a Gmail that matched Naomi's except for 1 extra letter. She asked if I wanted to pick up a parking pass because ours had the wrong license plate. I thanked her and said the mail would be returned and that we'd correct the address on file. I put the phone down and felt like a man carrying scissors through a balloon store. A public scene makes your heart beat differently. I had not intended to stage one at Sunday brunch with Naomi's parents at United Bakers on Lawrence, but the daughter's name mouse sat on documents with mine and a baby's, so the bagel and egg white omelette had a new companion, a manila folder. I laid out the ServiceOntario emails, the verification screenshots of the Nest timestamps, the Atlantica fob letter, the Sun Life dependent confirmation, and the freeze notices from Equifax and TransUnion. I described what I'd done without assigning motives because I understand how words can tilt a room. Naomi's mother, who can write a scene with her eyebrows, looked from paper to paper and then at her daughter. Her father, a retired TTC mechanic who fixes timelines in his head by station names, asked me whether a mistake this consequential could happen accidentally. The question sat between us like a pitcher of water nobody touched. Naomi's explanation arrived at night at our kitchen table in the cautious sentences people choose when they start by wanting to be believed. She said the Liberty Village place was a crush pad she shared with her cousin Lee because busy season had turned ours into mush and Lee needed a place to land that her ex didn't know about. She said the newborn registration had been a proof of concept demonstration she had helped Lee draft, and maybe something had submitted instead of saving. She said she realized when she saw my forwarded email and was on her way to fix it. She said the Sun Life add-on was an error from HR auto-populating a dependent field. She said she loved me and that my reaction made her feel accused of crimes that could have been avoided if I had asked her first. She said a lot of things that a better man might have held more gently. I told her, with all the warmth of a warning light, that intent did not injure paper much, impacted. The next day's piled evidence with a rhythm that felt almost choreographed. PC Optimum sent a notification of a baby formula purchase at Loblaws Lesserville at 10:18 p.m. on a night Naomi had said she was eating at her desk. The receipt attached to the app under our family account showed stage 1 formula, diapers, baby wipes, and a gift bag the colour of the one on our Nest clip. An Uber trip receipt to the hospital for sick children pinged my email first and then retracted. Like a stagehand pulling a curtain the wrong way, replacing the original with a generic trip complete that had the endpoint. Presto logs on Naomi's card showed taps at Ossington at 11:02 p.m. and at St. Patrick at 11:19 a pattern that did not match walking to Mandel and Reeve. Our TD app flagged an attempted $14,500 draw on the line of credit at 5:41 a.m. blocked by my branch only note. A case number materialized. TDFR minus 22,197. CRA emailed to say a CCB application in my name had been initiated and then paused. The reference number looked transactional, and gross CCB ref minus 600,317. I took my folder to Mandel and Reeves HR, the kind of carpeted room that turns hands into policy. I set down the ServiceOntario forms, the Sun Life dependent confirmation, the Presta report from Naomi's card, the Uber receipts, the PC Optimum log, the TD case number, and the Atlantica fob letter with the Gmail address. I asked for employment verification of Naomi's hours the night before and those around the registration time. The HR manager wrote a letter later that day on letterhead noting a shift swap locked at 9:53 p.m. Friday, that moved Naomi from on-site to remote review and an after-hours office entry at 12:34 a.m. Saturday, recorded by security. The letter did not tell me whether she had gone anywhere in between. It didn't have to. The timestamp on the newborn registration sat in my notes like a nail. The storage unit revealed itself the way so many truths do, as a piece of plastic falling out of a jacket pocket I moved to a hanger. The fob was neon blue and stamped with Smart Stop Self-Storage and an address on DuPont Near Lansdowne. The contract in the office listed Naomi as the primary renter and Lee as an authorized user, with our home address and my phone number, again off by one. Unit 306 smelled like unscented wipes and new rubber. Along one wall, diapers stacked in genius-level Tetris. A folded travel crib leaned under a grey blanket. On the floor, our cardboard banker's box labelled the docs with a neat hand-contained photocopies, an unsigned birth certificate application with my name, a daycare enrollment form for a centre on Carlo that had a spot open for March under sibling priority and listed me as backup contact, and a form for a paediatrician on College Street that had builder hip already. My subscriber number left a thin film on my tongue like cheap batteries. That night, for the first time since I'd been the sort of person who thinks paperwork can be charming, I wrote a letter that made my hand shake. I told Naomi in writing that I had opened a separate account for my income and would be paying the mortgage from it while freezing all joint lines. I told her I had set a fraud alert with the Registrar General and with CRA. I told her I had retained counsel, case file Co-N-425, and that the cease and desist was being sent regarding the use of my name and SIN for any dependent, with a demand for disclosure of all accounts or applications using my identifiers. I included 3 appointment slots at a downtown lab for DNA testing, court admissible, if there was a child in question. I stated that I would not speculate or be ambushed later. I wrote that I would not be adding any child to insurance until proven parentage. I wrote that if a child existed, I would not abandon one either. I hated every sentence, and I printed 2 copies. The second public scene happened at a Liberty Village Condor board meet and greet because life has a sense of theatre when you do not. I went to Atlantica's lobby because the fob letter said welcome, and I wanted unwelcoming facts. The concierge, a man whose face said he had seen the entire library of human excuses, confirmed 2 fobs active for Unit 702. He noted that a baby stroller had been brought through 3 times that week, daytime, by a woman matching Naomi's cousin's Instagram. He mentioned a parcel in the Luxor one addressed to Lee, care of Unit 702, with a return address from a family law firm in Brampton. He said packages held for over 5 days get flagged. I watched residents and gym clothes come and go like pages turning and felt like a paragraph someone had glued into the wrong chapter. I like to think of myself as reasonable. Reasonable men become a problem when they are asked to be furniture. I filed a police report to get a number for banks that like numbers 2P-53-40 2219 and a postal inspector complaint because the misaddressed 2Y letter about mail forward and confirmed someone was testing how far this would bend. I sent my lawyer to pull the Luxor one parcel using the building manager's authorization. The letter inside thanked Lee for proof of support in a custody matter and listed me as a financial guarantor and alternate guardian, pending an emergency. Somebody else's emergency had used my life as a bridge. My neighbour, Mrs. Chan, who does everything gently until there is no time for gentle, knocked on our door the next morning with a paper plate of pineapple buns and a look I had only ever seen when the weather radio chirps. She had seen Naomi carrying a car seat base to rideshare the day after the Unit 702 move in. She had watched a man she did not recognise help her with the base and leave in a separate Uber 2 minutes later. She wrote the times and license plates in a tiny notebook she keeps for everything from laundry schedules to Lunar New Year envelopes. She said she did not want to intrude. She looked like someone who understood that sometimes paper is not the only proof, but that it helps. The dentist office in Leslieville, where I had a cleaning boot, called to confirm my benefits and gently asked whether they should bill the newborn's fluoride varnish to me at next week's appointment since the child's OHIP was pending. I asked how they had my name linked to a baby appointment, They said the mother's file had added me as the other parent and that the system connected families for scheduling. They apologized the way polite people apologize for systems trying to be helpful. I cancelled the cleaning because tooth polish felt perverse in a week like this. If you have read this far, you might be asking what I asked myself in loop. Would you allow your name to be a temporary life jacket for a child who did not choose the storm, even if it exposes you to legal and financial contagion? Or would you insist on being nobody's bridge until proof put you on that document on purpose? Would you be able to forgive your spouse for drafting you into someone else's emergency army without consent? If her intent was to keep harm away from somebody incapable of asking for help the proper way, how long does intent get to sit in the good chair before impact asks it politely to leave? The accountant in Naomi couldn't help herself. She tried to spin at home and then in a counsellor's office the following week when she agreed to see one. She said she had been trying to keep her cousin and the baby safe from a man who had found creative ways to make life unlivable and who understood that bureaucracy can break a person as thoroughly as any fist. She said she had thought she could shore up the paperwork for a month and then mediate a permanent solution without involving me. She said she had not told me because she didn't want me to carry the weight or the risk. She said she had not expected the system to move so fast. I told her I respected the impulse to fix a broken system to route around a hazard, but that systems tend to break the people who stand in front of them. I told her I wanted to be the kind of man you could tell and who would then say yes or no with his eyes open. I told her I would not be a ghost signature. The counsellor wrote notes in soft pencil. We took turns breathing into a rechargeable HEPA filter. The aftermath refused to behave like an ending. ServiceOntario rolled back the registration with a memo that suggested sternness but carried relief in its italics. The Registrar General's office flagged our file to require in-person submissions only, 2 ID, 2 signatures, no exceptions. CRA avoided the CCB application attempt and put a hard notification on my account that made logging in feel like entering a vault. 2D bolstered the line of credit hauled with a requirement for manager approval with a code that a branch employee had to physically write on the form. Some Life scrubbed the dependent ad on after a thorny call with HR where I used the phrases without authorization and exposes me to liability enough times to feel like an actuary's ghost. The daycare on call replaced my name with an ad and left the file otherwise intact. A note sits in their system like a bruise that will look yellow in a few weeks. Naomi moved to the Liberty Village crash pad for 10 days so we could let our house breathe. She returned with a bag of groceries and receipts, placed them on the counter, and said she would not be asking me to support a lie any longer. She also said she would continue to support Leah and the baby with her own money and time and would do so within the law, and that if our marriage could not survive her refusal to abandon family, then we had bigger problems than paperwork. I heard everything she did not say. I have never wanted to be birthright and kind more than in that moment. I settled for being precise. We committed to rules that sound like cold air. All joint expenses run through our joint account. All personal expenses run through personal accounts. No signatures, physical or electronic, for the other for any reason. No children's paperwork for anyone includes either of us unless we are that child's parent and the word appears printed on paper we watch the clerk print. We parted the daily tasks. I handle mortgage and utilities. She handles groceries and insurance premiums. We book counselor sessions like dental appointments every 2 weeks. We do not attempt to share a bed when someone's stomach is all elbows. Sometimes I feel like a man who went to war with a filing cabinet. Other times, I feel lucky and ashamed to feel lucky because the world turns on axes that do not include my comfort. On mornings when my heart does the extra beat and then decides not to, I walk to Asbridges Bay and watch the gulls bully each other for dead fish and think how unromantic survival looks up close. I watch the semi scrape the condos and think about fobs and cameras and what counts as home when the paperwork lists more than one. People ask whether we are divorcing. I say we are not, and in that sentence sits 1,000 other sentences. We are learning how to live with a story that made us both into suspects and into witnesses. Naomi shows up for her cousin and for the baby in ways that are public and above board now: supervised visits, legal aid appointments, drop-offs of diapers and food, and the magic small things that make mornings possible. She documents every expense, like a woman who learned that the only forgiveness some institutions respect is an audit trail. I show up for the house and for my hands, building a wall of shelves for a couple on Logan who looked at me with trust as if I had not spent the winter learning how not to vanish from my own life. I unfroze one credit card last week long enough to buy a plane ticket to visit my mother in Halifax because she cried on the phone and told me the wind had made the cedar in the yard lean for the first time in 20 years, and suddenly it felt like a metaphor too lazy to refuse. I still keep the manila folder in the bottom drawer of my bench, in a plastic sleeve because plastic pretends to protect. Inside, the ServiceOntario congratulation that introduced the child to me in a font that wanted to celebrate the OHIP verification request with my name built into a machine that did not ask whether my body could handle another person's fare, the Presto log, the BC Optimum receipt, the HR letter, the Sun Life add-on, the Luxor 1 letter, the Smart Stop contract. It is a museum exhibit of a week in which I realize my name is a tool that other people will pick up if I leave it on the counter. Occasionally, around 3 a.m., my phone lights the ceiling again, and I expect confetti because my nervous system learned that shape. Instead, it is a shipping notification for a non I sold, or a comment on a listing, or a service alert for TTC delays at Coxwold because the city and its ghosts never sleep when you want them to. I put my hand on my chest and wait for the extra beat. Sometimes it arrives, sometimes not. I drink water from the glass on the nightstand and stare at the dark window where the faintest reflection shows me a man who still thinks paper is honest because ink cannot smirk. On the nights I cannot bear to be inside the house, I go to the lake and watch night terns move like they are being careful not to wake anyone. The phone's glow paints my fingers blue, and for a moment the confetti animation overlays everything: the birds, the broken waves, the boxy silhouettes of newly built lives behind me, and I feel the exact gap between forgiveness and self-preservation that I have been living in for months. I'm not sure which of those two is the kinder choice, or for whom. Would you have gone to the lab and demanded a test immediately, proof first, and then decided how to love the people who fumbled your name? Or would you have accepted a story about triage and fixed the paperwork and took the anger out for a walk until it tired itself, counting every baby suck you saw as a potential apology? Maybe there is no universal answer. Maybe there is only the answer you can live with when your phone goes off at 6 a.m. and the government says congratulations like the punchline of a joke you weren't there to hear. One image closes the loop for me: the ServiceOntario header glowing in the dark, confetti like falling birds, my name holding both weight and air. The light slid across the ceiling and into the hallway, brushed the pictures of our lives we meant to frame better and never did, and landed on the front door where the Nest camera stares back with its fixed round eye. Beyond it, Queen Street is empty and waiting, sodium light hummed low, and a night bus sighs as it breaks, doors opening for strangers who will board with names that belong to them and nobody else.